In the small, forgotten town of Black Hollow, there was a legend whispered in fearful tones, a tale of a mirror locked away in a mansion at the edge of the woods. The mansion belonged to the Abaddon family, whose wealth was amassed through methods no one dared to question. The last of their bloodline, Eleanor Abaddon, was said to have dabbled in dark arts. She vanished without a trace over a century ago, and since then no one had dared to approach the house. Until now. Caleb, a young man with an insatiable curiosity, had moved to Black Hollow seeking solitude and inspiration for his next novel. He had heard the rumors of the cursed Abaddon mansion, and despite the warnings of the townsfolk, he was intrigued. After weeks of research, he found that the mansion had been left completely untouched. It was as if the world had forgotten it existed. On a cold October evening, Caleb made his way through the dense forest to the mansion. The air grew thick as he approached. The trees seemed to lean in closer, and a sense of foreboding settled in his chest. The mansion loomed before him, its Gothic architecture weathered and broken, yet it still held an eerie, malevolent grace. The front door creaked open with ease as if inviting him inside. Dust hung in the air like a fog, and the silence was deafening. Caleb's flashlight illuminated portraits of the Abaddon family along the walls, their eyes following him as he moved deeper into the house. Each step echoed as though the house itself was aware of his presence. He found the mirror in an upstairs bedroom, just as the rumors had described. It was an enormous, ornate thing, framed in black and gold and etched with cryptic symbols. The surface of the mirror was unnaturally dark, and as Caleb stared into it, his reflection seemed faint, almost swallowed by the shadows. Compelled by an unknown force, Caleb touched the mirror. The instant his fingers grazed the cold surface, a sharp chill ran through his body, and the room grew even colder. His reflection blinked, though he hadn't. Then it smiled, a slow, grotesque smile that spread across the reflection's face like a crack in glass. Caleb recoiled, heart pounding, but when he looked again, the reflection was gone. In its place was something else, something wrong. The figure in the mirror was no longer him. It was a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth, staring directly at him. Behind the figure, the room in the reflection had changed. It was no longer the dusty, decaying room of the mansion, but a twisted version of it. The walls oozed with black slime, and the air seemed to vibrate with a low humming sound. The figure raised its hand and pressed it against the glass, as if trying to push through. Caleb's breath hitched, his legs frozen in place. The mirror began to pulse like it had a heartbeat, the vibrations growing stronger. Suddenly, a voice whispered from behind him, "You shouldn't have come." Caleb spun around, but there was no one there. The air was colder now, his breath visible in the dim light. The mirror began to rattle, the sound growing louder until it was almost deafening. Desperate to escape, Caleb turned to leave the room, but the door slammed shut with a violent crash. He was trapped. The reflection of the gaunt figure pressed harder against the mirror, the glass beginning to crack. Caleb stumbled back, heart racing as the figure's distorted face twisted into a snarl. A horrible, inhuman scream filled the air as the mirror shattered, sending shards flying in all directions. But instead of falling to the ground, the shards hung suspended in the air, spinning around Caleb in a whirlwind. The pieces began to reflect distorted versions of him, each one more grotesque than the last. His skin sagged, his eyes hollowed, and a wicked smile crept across every face in the reflections. A sharp pain shot through Caleb's chest as he felt something cold and solid wrap around his heart. He gasped, looking down to see black tendrils creeping up from the floor, winding their way around his body, pulling him toward the mirror's frame. He fought to resist, but the harder he struggled, the tighter the grip became. The figure from the mirror stepped out of the frame, now fully manifest in the room with him. Its skeletal hands reached for Caleb, and its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of jagged, broken teeth. The thing's hollow eyes bore into Caleb's soul as it whispered in a voice like grinding glass, "You belong to the mirror now." The tendrils yanked him forward, and as he was dragged toward the broken mirror, his vision began to blur. The last thing he saw before the darkness consumed him was his own reflection, smiling. Days later, the townspeople noticed that the light in the Abaddon mansion's upstairs window had returned. Some said they could see a figure standing in front of the mirror, staring out at the forest. But when anyone tried to investigate, the house was always empty. Caleb's disappearance became just another part of the legend, another warning passed down in hushed tones. Once you look into the mirror of Abaddon, it looks back and it never lets go. The house still stands waiting for its next visitor, but those who know the story of the Abaddon mirror stay far away, for they understand that some reflections are not yours, and some mirrors are not just glass. Would you dare to look?